This video contains some notes on preparing the assignments, talking about the uh, annotated bibliography and proposal assignment, and looking ahead to the next steps for the next assignment. So first, a note about documents and file names. Only use Word document as a file type or a PDF. Do not use Pages because those documents cannot be opened on all computers. In terms of the file names must have your last name and student number. Do not use periods in your file name. The only period should be right before the docx file name or file type. Only use underscore to separate the words. So the only period should be immediately before the file type. So you would have, for example, using my last name, King underscore student number underscore, and then proposal or a piece of your title, period, and then docx, which would go in automatically when you save your file. So it might look something like this. If you have a common last name, you might put your first initial in there. So King underscore A underscore student number underscore Indigenous rights, and then the file type. In terms of the title page, the first thing you're going to have on a title page is a title. So you're going to have a descriptive title that tells the reader what's in your essay, what your essay is about. So in this case, the title that's being used is The Politics of Protesting Indigenous Peoples' Direct Action and Policy Change, which is a very nice title. The next thing you need to include are things like your name, your student number, the date of the due date of the assignment, the course you're in, the instructor name, and so on. And then, of course, you need to have page numbers. You start with page number 1 on the title page, and you continue from there for your whole document. For the proposal, there's some things that you really must include. You need to have a topic. So you're going to say a sentence something like, I will examine the role that Indigenous direct action plays in Canadian politics. Or if you're writing your essay, you would be saying, I am examining, or I have examined the role, and so on. You need to have some kind of argument. Your proposal, the argument in your proposal can change based on your research that you do for your essay. So in this case, you might say something like, I will argue that direct action impacts democracy and plays an important role in democratic policymaking. Okay, something like that. Or if you're talking about your essay, in my essay, I argue that. You also need to say why it matters. So in this case, you might say something like, the interests of the Indigenous peoples of our country have long been underrepresented in the normal or formal political arena, forcing them to take direct action in the form of protests and social movements to promote their political, social, and environmental concerns. Something like that. So you're saying why it matters. You also need to have some kind of theoretical frame. For the POSC 1200 course, you might use you might say something like, I will use the developmental theory of democracy, or you might say, I will look at representative democracy or direct democracy or something like that. You need to say something. And you also need to say something about the philosopher that is connected to that theory. If your focus is on a policy issue, then your philosopher can just be mentioned, but it's not the key part of your assignment or your essay, okay? Talking about how it relates to what you're talking about in your argument. Usually your philosopher is going to be connected to the theory that you're talking about. And then you want to make sure that you specify very clearly if you are using a policy and which policy it is. The best essays are going to be the ones that have a specific policy to talk about. And finally, you also have to have page numbers, and you will double space your essay. In terms of the annotated bibliography, so your annotated bibliography is contained in the same document as your proposal. It will immediately follow your proposal. So you're going to have the order you're going to have everything is, you're going to have the title page, you're going to have a proposal, and you're going to have an annotated bibliography. You start your annotated bibliography with a heading, quite simply, Annotated Bibliography. You already have your working title for your essays on your title page. The page numbering that you have will continue from the previous parts of the document. And then you're going to have your first reference and annotation. The first reference is going to be in APA formatting. It's going to be in alphabetical order. You're going to have all the full bibliographical book details. It's going to have a hanging indent in terms of the alignment. And then you're going to have the annotation. The annotation is in sentence format. It tells the reader what the source is about. You need to know if this is an article, a dissertation, a book, a news article, a policy brief, or something. Quite frequently, students will call everything an article or just generally a source, but they don't really know what it is. Dissertations, for example, appear quite regularly in these things, and I think that students who don't really know that a dissertation is a really long and complicated book quite often. So they're not the easiest things to read. You always want to use peer-reviewed scholarly sources unless you have been directed otherwise. Maybe you have permission to use news articles in addition to your scholarly peer-reviewed sources. Maybe you need to use policy briefs or other grade documents, reports, and that kind of thing. But make sure that it's acceptable to your professor. In my case, for this particular assignment for POSC 1200, I wanted 5 scholarly peer-reviewed sources, and then you could have other things like newspaper articles and policy briefs and so on, in addition to those 5 scholarly sources. Then you're going to have your second reference, again in alphabetical order. If you refer to the author of your source, you refer to that person by their last name, not their first name. Okay, so if it's Peter Millard, you're going to say Millard argues. You're not going to say Peter argues. So only use the last name or the surname. And then you're going to look ahead to your next steps. So you're going to be working on doing some rough drafts and revising those drafts. So you're going to look at the comments on your proposal and annotated bibliography. You're going to finish your research. You're going to fill in any gaps identified. That could be identified by your instructor or your TA, or it might be something that you thought of after you submitted your proposal. You're allowed to make it better. What I really want you to do, not just allowed to do it, I want you to make your essay the best it can be. So fill in any gaps that you notice, even if you haven't thought of it in time for your proposal. You're going to organize your research and your ideas. You're going to use some kind of outline or other organizational strategy to make sure that you're putting your thoughts together. When people just throw their ideas down on a piece of paper and don't really organize it, I can tell when I'm marking the essay. It comes across as confused because your ideas are confused. Start writing early. If you start writing early, you have time to put your essay aside for a while and then come back to it, which makes it easier to revise. You want to make sure you revise your first draft. You need to have someone read it. The first draft you might not want anybody to read, but your second draft and your third draft, definitely you do want to do that. If you're writing your essay the night before it's due, you're not going to have time for anybody to read it and for you to have time to actually revise it. Revision means tearing your draft apart, not just tweaking a word or two or some sentences here and there. It means looking very critically at what you've written already and trying to figure out, is this the best way to make sense of your argument? And then you're going to bring a good rough draft to a peer tutor or to a writing room, or in our case, for this year, we have, for POSC 1200, we're going to have a writing workshop. So you're going to bring a good rough draft, not your very first rough draft. You want to have done some editing and thinking about that rough draft, and bring it for some peer revision at this writing workshop. And then you're going to revise it again based on that feedback. So then when you write your final essay, it is going to be in really great shape. So your final research essay is written after you've done several revisions of your very first draft. You're going to proofread it carefully. This is where you might change one or two words, right? You're not revising at this stage, you're proofreading. You're looking for the things that you've missed. Remember, it's really hard to revise and proofread your own writing because you know what you meant to say, so your brain will fill in the gaps. If you wrote a word and you think you know what it meant, you're going to still assume that that's what it means when you are proofreading it. So you have to read it carefully. Some people suggest reading it backwards, reading it aloud. There's all kinds of different strategies which you can find online. You might want to find a checklist to make sure that you have all the required components. Double check it against your assignment information sheet, for example. So you're making sure you have a title page with a title, your name on it. I did have several assignments come in recently that had no name on it. You want to make sure that all your citations and references are in APA format, and double check it. Even the best writers will get confused about some of the details of the APA format, such as where commas go. Should you be using the word and or the ampersand, and so on. Remember, in your final research essay, if you did an annotated bibliography previously, you do not include the annotations again. Your references may be the same, but you don't need the annotations anymore, so you can just get rid of those. And then, of course, remember that your file names have to be in correct format. So I do absolutely want you to have your last name, your student number, and then a word or two about what your essay is about in the file name. The only period should be the one that appears automatically in front of the file type. That's it for now. Happy writing.